Good evening. So what is your mind? Any progress on that front? Well, if you want to understand the essence of who you are, you have to be able to answer that question. And in Zen practice, if you want to attain enlightenment, you have to see your mind. But the mind is not a material object, so you can't see your mind with your eyes. To see your mind, you have to turn your attention inward and completely clear out your mind of all thoughts. In day-to-day life, we have to do certain things to survive. We all have to eat, which means we need to think and use our minds to find food. And what you may not realize is that when you use your mind, it's like using a dish. After you use it, it gets dirty. So as thoughts and emotions and feelings gather, they clutter your mind and they cloud your perception. So if you don't clean your plate after you eat, the flavor from your last meal will taint whatever you're going to eat next. And if you don't clean your dish and you continue to eat from it, it'll gather germs and become unhealthy. And your mind is no different. You have to constantly clean it out or it will become covered in thoughts, like the germs gathering on a dirty dish. Thoughts and emotions that get stuck in your mind can affect everything you do. Meditation clears your mind, just like washing the dishes cleans your plates. So if you develop a constant practice of washing your dishes and meditating, it'll help you to maintain your health. So in traditional Zen meditation, we use a mantra to clear our mind. The mantra is the focal point of meditation, and it's a word or a phrase that we repeat in our mind. So if you try not to think, thoughts inevitably will come into your mind. By focusing on the mantra, you can use it to push out all the other thoughts. As you meditate, only concentrate on the mantra. If any other thought comes in your mind, let it go. And then return to focusing on your mantra. The mantra I always suggest to use is Kwanseum Bosal. Kwanseum Bosal is the name of the bodhisattva of love and compassion. And she's often depicted with thousands of eyes and thousands of hands. And she's said to be able to see the suffering of everyone and help those who call out her name. So that's what we'll be using for the mantra tonight. When you're sitting, we're going to sit with our legs crossed and your hands, right hand, left hand, touching thumbs, centered in your lap. Try to keep your back and your neck straight, no slouching. And we'll close our eyes, but if they were open, they'll be at a 45-degree angle looking at the floor. So, and if you do get uncomfortable, you can, stand up and stretch out or stretch your legs. Just try to be quiet and respectful of everybody meditating around you. So with that said, we're going to turn around and face the wall and meditate. Yeah, so when I first read about Buddhism in various books, that was my first introduction, just reading about it. And I became fascinated about the idea of enlightenment and attaining lasting inner peace. It just seemed so appealing. So I tried a few different types of meditation on my own, just stuff I had read in books, different techniques. And I always felt really uncomfortable, sitting. And it was so difficult for me. Usually I would just give up after a few tries. And still everything I read about meditation made me feel like I was missing out on a valuable way to like understand more about myself. And but it seemed like from everything I had read, you kind of needed to leave society and isolate yourself on a mountain, and in order to be successful. It just seemed like that was always the setting. But even then, I wasn't sure I would be able to do it if I had gone through that, and it really wasn't. That wouldn't have fit the lifestyle I was in. So at that point, I just felt like the mountain was too steep for me to climb without help, and I gave up all my attempts at meditation. But I was still always like really attracted to the idea of getting enlightenment. And the big turning point for me is when I discovered Shimgum Do and met Sabanim. That was my teacher, and he created the martial art Shimgum Do, and he used choreographed sword forms and karate forms as a mantra for a moving meditation. So concentrating on those forms while you're moving, and taking part in those classes helps me establish the routine of meditation. And we did short little stints of meditation, sitting meditation at the end. And it was always easier after I had kind of dissipated some of that energy that I'd been accumulating throughout the day. And but it was always still really hard for me to do we had the monthly sitting meditation, which is kind of what I modeled this after, where we would sit for 45 minutes and then he would talk for 45 minutes. And that was incredibly painful for me. Like my back and my legs would get so stiff and they'd go numb. And yeah, it was really challenging for me to do that. But the reward was getting to hear Sabanim speak at the end of class. He always like talked about something about how powerful your mind is, and I was always fascinated by what he was saying. Like I never wanted to miss one of his classes. And so, despite all of my discomfort, I think I only missed one of his classes in the 16 years I lived with him at the temple. And it's probably the thing that got me hooked more than actually the martial arts was what he was saying in his classes, because it was just stuff that I had never really considered before. But in his talks, he would often explain the relationship between sitting and moving meditation. And he would say, a clear mind makes clear thinking and clear action. And also, a clear action makes clear thinking and a clear mind. So the point is to have all of your actions become meditation. So it works both ways. If you're meditating, it makes your actions clear. If you're making your actions clear, it makes your mind clear. And when I did the forms, when I was doing the choreography, I could tell if my mind was clear or not clear. If I was focusing on the techniques like a mantra, I could do them clearly. And if my mind started to wander, that's when I would make a mistake. So after I learned the forms, I started to mind train. So I'd use, instead of using like a word like Kwanzaa and Bosal, I would use the visualization of the techniques and the choreography as my mantra during sitting meditation. And then that helped my ability to physically perform all the various sequences and techniques. Sometimes I couldn't even do them until I mind trained it because it was so confusing. Until I was able to visualize it, I couldn't actually perform them. But this meant I was using the forms to clear my mind during sitting meditation, and I was using my actions to clear my mind during moving meditation. And I found that combination of sitting and moving meditation to be a more sustainable practice for me. And it was a really effective way for me to clear my mind. And for me, it was a critical bridge in understanding how to use meditation in other aspects of my life. It was a piece that was always missing when I tried other forms of meditation, because you can't sit still forever, right? So how do you meditate when you have to do things like live life, go to work, deal with different forces and people in your life? So in this I had finally found a meditation practice that resonated with me. So I decided to fully immerse myself, and I moved into the temple, and I studied with Sabanim, and I lived there for the next 16 years. So that was after probably attending 2 of his classes. Yeah, and then after he passed away, fast forward 16 years later, in 2021, I moved on to found this, which is the Zen Art Center. And what I had discovered is, through my years of practice, that you can use this technique of meditating on your actions. You can apply it to any art form. So when I use the term art form, I mean any kind of craft that you're putting your heart into. So my original art form was martial arts that he taught me. And now I also use sitting and moving meditation in my writing and in my visual art. So whenever I'm making art or writing and I reach an impasse, I'll just take a short break and I'll meditate. And usually that helps me overcome whatever the obstacle is. And the goal of what I'm trying to teach everybody here is how to learn how to apply these techniques to all the various aspects of your life, and use that to enhance your meditation practice and also your artistic endeavors. So whatever you want to put your heart into. So my teacher taught me about Zen and meditation through martial arts. He would give his talks once a month, but it was really more about using the martial arts, but also all the actions you would do at the temple. Like, he always wanted them to be clear, like doing your dishes right after using them, drying them off and putting them back on the shelf where they're supposed to go, just so everything was clear. If you take it from one place, you put it back in the same place. He was big on leaving things better than the way you found it. Like, if you go into a room, never leaving a light on in anywhere, So after learning how to master the skills he was teaching me, I was able to implement that process to mastering other art forms. So it's a really useful thing just to get better at whatever you want to do, learning how to really focus your mind on whatever it is. And so becoming a master of something, I think, is very important. Just applying yourself to it until you really feel like you are a master at it. And it usually takes a long time of dedication to do something like that. But on the path to enlightenment, becoming a master is really only the first step. There's lots of masters who don't have enlightenment. To attain enlightenment, you have to learn how to harness your focus on every moment of your life. Sitting meditation is a way to practice your focus, and it's a way to practice focusing and clearing your mind, but you're also limiting a lot of the extraneous distractions that arise from your surroundings. So we try to do it in a quiet room. We try to close our eyes so we're not seeing things, and tune out whatever we're hearing, and just clearing our mind. But you can't sit still forever, right? You have to be able to move around in order to survive and live your life. So inevitably, when you do that, it gives rise to more thoughts. So you have to always go back to meditation, and engaging in an artistic practice of some sort can help you learn how to focus your mind and meditate while you're moving around. So trying to apply it to everything you're doing. When you're doing something, don't let your thoughts come between you and whatever that action is you're doing. And I find just doing some sort of art or something you're really passionate about, putting your heart into, is a good way to learn how to focus that in a controlled setting. And when you're completely focused on the task at hand, your thoughts are quiet, and you can reach a state of flow, like a flow state. You kind of feel like you're in a zone, for instance. Sometimes I've felt it a lot when I would do athletic stuff or like riding a bike sometimes. But that's like at a point when you're in that zone of focus and you're completely locked into what you're doing, you can do things that you never imagined were possible. So that's why you see people who are really locked into their art create really beautiful art, and people who are high level athletes really focused on the moment, they can do things that are just seem impossible at that time. And so the goal of practicing the sitting and the moving meditation is to learn how to channel this ability to focus to the other aspects of your life. And so just trying to do it little bit by little bit. It's hard at first. Your mind tends to want to wander. I think a lot of the pressure we have in society kind of pushes you to let your mind wander and think about things outside of what's right in front of you. So it's not an easy task, but it's something that just establishing this routine of sitting meditation helps you learn how to focus your mind, and then you can try to apply that when you're doing anything, even when you're doing the dishes. But I also find just finding something that like an art that you want to practice, that's a good way to kind of evaluate if you're staying in that zone. And even when you get out of it, like I said, just take a break, do a little sitting meditation, and a lot of times that will help you get back into the place you were focused on. So I've been using that a lot recently as I try to make illustrations for my book, and a couple attempts, and I'm not super happy with what's going on, but then I look at it and then I just meditate, and then I'll have a different idea about how to approach it. And I spend a lot of time actually just kind of visualizing what I'm going to do, how I'm going to move the pen or the pencil to make the strokes. And I learned how to do that all from practicing sword, but then, I also apply it to other things I'm doing in my life. And I think you can start with any art form. It's just about committing to it and trying to grow and get better and improve and evaluate what you're doing, and use meditation to help you have breakthroughs when you get stuck. When I started out making visual art, I expected to use it as a way to communicate. I wanted to pass on the life-changing lessons that were life-changing for me that I learned from my teacher, and I wanted to do it in a captivating way so that other people would be interested in learning these kind of things. However, I didn't really realize how much I would learn from the process of making the art. So it caused me to examine the world in a different way. That's when I recognized that the creative process itself can help you understand your mind. So as I tried to draw and describe in the imagery some of the most profound realizations I had after years of this practice, it was extremely challenging because I felt like a lot of times these experiences transcended words. Like it wasn't even visual experiences, it was just feelings that had meaning and that would come to me from meditating. And it seemed like I said, they could only be experienced through or understood through experience. So my only option really seemed to be to create analogies and metaphors through my art, using things from nature that would evoke similar feelings in other people. So that was the goal of what I was trying to communicate. And while I was depicting the things I experienced with different imagery, I began noticing there's patterns that were repeated at different scales throughout the universe. So I kept seeing repeating patterns of things. And it was striking how many different like fractal elements there are in nature. Like the shape of molecules end up looking like the shapes of the crystals they eventually form. So like stuff on the micro level was reflected in a macro level. Things like I noticed are like, and you might have too, but like solar systems have a similar shape to the way we depict an atom. To me, a star kind of resembles a flower that's on fire. And spinning galaxies always appeared like an eye to me when I'd see the pictures of them in a telescope. So after I noticed these things, I just became convinced it wasn't a coincidence. And I came to the realization that we seek to find recognizable patterns whenever we encounter something that's unknown. So we try to draw connections to things we're already familiar with when we see something we don't understand. And much of our language is actually derived from drawing connections and using analogous words to things we've already experienced. So we can use art in a similar way to translate our internal experiences through metaphors, imagery, music, dance, and other art forms. And it was kind of magical because I realized that that's what Sabanim had done with martial arts. Like he explained Zen to me through that art form, which is one of the more foreign art forms you would think you could teach Zen with. But it really, I literally learned everything I know from that. And I think it's almost more apparent in other art forms. So, but the art reveals things about our mind that they can't be directly observed or understood through our senses, because our mind is not material. So we can't observe them with our eyes. We can't hear it, smell it, taste it, feel it. I think we can feel it, but not in a tactile sense. But the creative process brings what begins as a vision in our mind, and it puts it out into reality. And then that gives us a small reflection about what our mind is. So art makes it possible to share our internal experiences with other people. And if one of our ideas resonates with another person, it can start a conversation about similar experiences we've shared. As we realize that we share common experiences, it creates bonds between the people that are sharing these connections. And these bonds that form between humans, I think we often describe that feeling as love. And love is the energy that's fueling creation. Literally, it quite often results in creating other beings. So, and that feeling of love is what gives birth to compassion, which is wanting to help other people. When we realize that when we share these experiences, we can create a collective idea and consciousness about the reality we live in. So as we share our experiences, we get a broader view of what the reality we live in is. And this sharing of experiences helps us understand each other and the fabric of our reality, which in turn helps us to navigate our own life and, our relationships, but also, science in a certain way is sharing experimental experiences that we have been able to tell other people about. They can repeat it and find out for themselves, but eventually we all start to buy into that and accept it as the way things work. So I think it's all an extension of this process of creation and sharing and using these things to help other people understand the world and the universe. So Zen Buddhism teaches us how to clear our minds. And as we clear out our thoughts and our opinions and desires, our sense of ourself, our ego, it starts to dissolve. And when we can let go of that sense of ourself, you can start to see that the boundaries that appear to separate us from our environment, they become blurry. And you can recognize that the lines that we draw around ourselves that define ourselves, they're actually pretty arbitrary and conceptual. Like, you got a lot of your identity from what people told you before you knew anything. Like, someone told you what your name was, so that's just a concept we all kind of accept as true. But really, when you look at like a microscopic level, there really aren't any lines. There's like a lot of cells with space in between them, and the cells have space in them. And when you get down to the smallest level, we can see it's just particles and with a lot of space in between them. So all the lines that you perceive are composed of those elements. So when you recognize that, you realize there's an interdependence and a constant exchange between everything in the universe. And that, when you look at the world in that way, it makes sense to treat everything with compassion. And this shift in my perception completely changed the way I conceive of my art. And as I started to channel my art through meditation, I realized that I was revealing something fundamental about the nature of my mind. And I began to see it reflected in everything in the universe. So my goal here is to hope to inspire all of you to try and do the same, and so that you can see it for yourself. Any questions? Gazzy?
What did your master say about sleeping most of your life? I mean, times that people dream and their mind is so active. Is that what did you ever say anything
about dreams?
Yeah.
Like
you're not awake, your mind is
You're
still visualizing.
Yeah, and I think some dreams come from your body and some dreams come from your mind. So sometimes when you're dreaming, you lose your sense of yourself, and you start to get dreams about things you never experienced, right? So that's coming from your mind. It's had lifetimes of experience, and some things that are more familiar come from your body and your brain. And so it's this thing where you're kind of going back and forth between these two realms of your mind with no body and your body giving different messages into your mind. I can't remember. My teacher spoke about dreams, but I can't remember specifically what he said, but I see that you have memories coming in from your brain, but you also have memories which aren't physical that come from your mind, and it kind of mixes those together to create things that that you're to create these like experiences. They're not visual, but it gives you these experiences, and my feeling is that that is your mind trying to communicate to you and motivate you with certain feelings, so that it doesn't use words and language. It creates a feeling in your heart that makes you want to react to it. And I think it's a subconscious like message basically. And sometimes they can be heavily influenced by your body too. So, you know, when you're sick, you can have bad dreams. I don't know if that happens to you. That happens to me a lot too. So I think they're hard to interpret with, you know, with a rational mind. But I think it's kind of important to listen to the feelings sometimes. And I do remember one thing Sabanin would say is if you you can make your sleep into a meditation. So he would just say, you know, like meditate when you're going to sleep, and then when you sleep, it's meditating. It all counts. And like he used to tell me stuff that I haven't quite figured out yet, but he told me if you tell your body 1 minute of sleep equals 2 minutes, you only need to sleep half as much.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I mean it does seem to, like, the more I meditate, the less I need to sleep. I will say that there's a correlation, definitely. Yeah, and I was trying to think of something else he had said, but
Did he sleep? Like, was he like a not sleep?
he slept from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. every day, 4 hours, and then I think he'd take a nap in the morning as well. But generally, he would sleep about 4 hours and then a small nap. He was a very, very interesting, like, had really strong body control. Yeah, he was a very interesting person. But yeah, I wrote a poem about dreams. The first poem I wrote that gave birth to my book, basically. It was like the thesis of my book was a bunch of it was just a bunch of lines I wrote down after the most intense meditation I had ever experienced. And then I went to sleep and I thought I was dreaming. And when I woke up, the lines were there. And I called the poem "The Universe of Dreams." And it's like the last poem in my book at this. So I have a lot of thoughts about it. But when you're in that meditative state of dreaming where you completely lose your body, and then you start to perceive everything all at once, and I'm not talking about your life, I'm talking about everything in the universe all at once. And to me, that's where you go every time you lose your body, like whether you're before you're born, after you die, or when you're in your deep state of dreaming when you have no body. And that universe of dreams is it contains everything that you've ever filled your mind with, and everything that is in the consciousness of the universe too. And so I believe it's important to learn meditation and get familiar with that experience so that when you do pass on, that you can navigate through that and not feel just the chaos. Like, as you, it's like the difference between knowing where you are and not knowing where you are. So if you practice, then you know where you are. It's not scary. If you don't practice and you experience that, it can be overwhelming. So if you know where you are, it's like heaven. If you don't know where you are, and it's more like hell. So because it will seem chaotic when you perceive all of those things at the same time, which is a big thing I'm trying to convey with that poem, basically. Yeah, I can let you read it. Definitely. I used to give it to people before I had any of my book done. Just give people that one poem. But what's that? I don't have it memorized, unfortunately. I could probably give you certain lines. I might have already given you some in my explanation. So I could pull it up on my computer, but I don't know. I don't know if I want it floating on the internet right at this moment. Yeah. But when I turn off the camera, I can share it. Do you have other questions? Thoughts about dreams?
I think I often struggle with understanding what love is, and I think something you said kind of helped bridge that a little bit.
Can I had some. I was gonna say if I had extra time, I was gonna talk about love. It's one of the fundamental aspects of Buddhism, and I think it can be confusing because in our society we often use the word love the wrong way. It's a lot of times we'll say, like, I love my car and I love my radio and I love my computer. That's because when I turn it on, it comes on, and I push the buttons, it does what I want it to do. That's because I'm controlling it, and that's not really love. Love is not about controlling. The one of the quotes from Buddha, which is I recently looked it up because somebody asked me for Buddhist scriptures, but I never studied Buddhist scriptures. I only learned from what my teacher told me, and it basically said that Buddha's quote was translated by. There's a lot of different translations, but it basically said that you should radiate love in every direction throughout the universe with no hindrance, no expectation of anything in return, and no hostility associated with it. So if I turn my computer on, it doesn't come on, I won't love it anymore. That's not love. That's not really what it. That's misusing the word. The way Sabanim said it to me, which I really like, is he told me I should love like the sun, and always giving, always shedding light, always helping people see the way, and never asking for anything in return. And so I try to shine love in that way. And so even when you give it, sometimes people can't see it because they have their own clouds in their perception that they don't understand that's what's happening. So, but I just see it that way. I don't take hostility because people don't accept it. Like I was saying, people making negative comments online or something like that. Like I just see it as a cloud of ignorance that they can't they can't see through. I'm just trying to help. Maybe I misstate something or don't say it exactly the way I would have preferred to, but that's my intention the whole time. And, I think so. There's like interpersonal love, and I talked a little bit about that, about how we start to create bonds between each other, and I think that's interpersonal love. But there's a bigger love that's more universal, and I call it the force of creation. So it's why everything exists, because there's a force that's not material that's causing things to be created. And so it comes from your mind and the universal mind. That's why things cluster together and become something different. And my belief is that all of these things, you only are aware of it because you're alive and you can perceive it. If you're dead, you don't see any of that. But when you have a body, and then you can participate in that, you can take things in your mind and you can create them, or you can take two different concepts and you put them together and you have a new idea. And so we have the concept. We did it in the reverse order, but we have the concept of atoms, and we stick atoms together, and now we call them a molecule, right? So that's creating a new concept out of something we're perceiving. And when we do that, that's the creative process. And when we do that, it's making a reflection of something that was in our mind that we put into reality. And that is how we're trying to create a mirror of our mind out in reality. And so as you piece together all of these different reflections, you get a bigger picture of what your mind is. And the reason we make these things and come up with these ideas is because of love. And that's when I'm saying this is not a concept we use in our society. It's it's a different idea of love. It's like a universal love. It's the force that makes everything happen, basically, and why the universe is constantly expanding, because we're creating new concepts and ideas, and all of that is filling our mind, and that's actually what it's growing into. It's like another dimension that it's not physical, but it's one that we all perceive, but we don't really understand, because it's like the mirror doesn't know it's a mirror. So your mind is like a mirror trying to see itself, and so it's putting something out there so it can see part of itself. And the force that drives us comes from our heart, and that's love. And it's why we want to create. It's a lot of people, like, I'm not saying this is a lot of people want to have children because they think it will give them a reflection of themselves in some way, or show them something about themselves, or put something of themselves out into the universe. I think that's why we create things, like why we're so obsessed with artificial intelligence, because we don't understand our own intelligence. So we want to put something that mimics it so that we can understand it. And then that will reflect back on us, and we can understand our own intelligence better. That was probably more than you bargained for there, but but yeah, that's something I try to write a lot about. I have a poem about love in my book too, and it's like, to me, it's one of the most important poems in my whole book, because I'm trying to explain that love is bigger than between just us humans, and it's part of what ties us into the rest of the universe too. for some reason, since the beginning of the universe, all of these molecules and atoms spread out. They became stars, and then they dissipated again after the stars exploded and became different molecules. And then somehow they formed organisms, and then those became our body. Like, why did that happen? To me, the force that's driving that is love. And and consciousness runs through us as organisms, but it runs through everything in the universe. Like the table has table consciousness, the computer has computer consciousness, the chair has chair consciousness. And why is that? Because our mind has given it that. And we wouldn't perceive any of that without a mind. So most people think their mind is in their body, but I'm going to tell you something crazy. Your body is actually in your mind. Like there was no body until you had a mind, and someone made up the idea of a body in their mind and then told you you have a body. That's actually how the process worked. So it kind of turns things a little inside out when you start to look at the universe in that way. And that's what I'm saying. Like this whole process that I was trying to describe tonight totally changed the way I perceive everything in the universe. It's actually why I never was an artist before I started meditating. It's why I can draw now, because I no longer see lines. I just see colors and shadows and things like that. Like when I used to draw and draw a body, and it would always come out like a stick figure because I was trying to draw the lines. Now I don't draw that same way because I don't see it the same way. Well, I've kept you extra late tonight. Sorry. But you're welcome to ask more questions. I just wanted to not make you feel like I'm keeping you here past when you have to go. Okay. Well, there's always next month, and yeah. And also, I'm just gonna stop this so I can